long count. There's the snap. Jared back. Jared looking, throwing right side. One. Jamo end zone. Got him. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Oh, baby, what a dive from 16.
Week 16 of the NFL season. I am Tim Twentyman. This is the Twentyman Huddle podcast. This is Rich Silva. Does a great job covering the Lions for the Detroit News. And the playoffs have started, Rich.
Sure.
That's kind of where it's at with this team, right? Week 16 is the playoffs for Detroit. They're in must-win territory. Need a little bit of help, but, really it's about them and winning these 3 games. But before we get to kind of what needs to happen moving forward, let's look back just a minute at the Los Angeles Rams game. Your biggest takeaway from that game, maybe something that needs to turn around for this team moving forward to kind of get them going in the right direction and get on a win streak.
Sure. I think it was 2 things, one on offense, one on defense. And I kind of look back since the Eagles game, it's really felt like we've almost rewound a little bit to last year where it's, the offense has seemed to sort of, I guess, rediscover that juice that they had last year. Not that they ever lost it because they have led the league in points basically the whole season. But, it just felt a little clunky. This last month has not felt that way. I mean, They performed as good as anyone has looked against that Rams defense, the 3 consecutive 3-and-outs notwithstanding. But to answer your question about, I think, what needs to change, so to speak, is, more consistency from the defense, of course. Just that I know we've talked about the explosive plays all season long, but they've given up, I believe it's 54 20-plus yard gains through the air. And exactly half of those 27 have come in the last month. I think it was 7 against Stafford and the Rams last week. So that's definitely obviously going to have to change moving forward.
And I think it'll be interesting when Dan talked earlier in the week about some of the ideas defensively that he was talking about early in the week during the game plan sessions with Calvin Shepard about giving those guys on the outside a little bit more help, putting maybe a little bit more onus on the front 7 to handle things in the run game on their own and put some more resources in the pass defense. It'll be interesting to see kind of what that looks like, if it's a little bit more cover 2, cover 3, using those safeties to help those corners out. I think that'll be interesting to see kind of what they decided to do. But to your point, they got to do something against the pass, right? They can't keep giving up these explosive plays in the pass.
No, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a little bit less 3 linebacker stuff. We know they love their base defense with Barnes, Anzalone, and Campbell on the field together. Point. But maybe it's more nickel. Maybe it's an added DB on the field. But then again, like Dan Campbell has talked about, you take a player out of the box and put it in the secondary, you're going to get weaker in the run game. And we're talking about a defense that did get gashed for 5.5 yards a carry against the Rams. So you're going to get weaker somewhere trying to help the secondary.
What's the recipe you think for success? The Lions had a 3-game win streak earlier in the season, so they've done it. Obviously, this team won 15 games last year with a lot of the same personnel. This team can get hot and can go on a streak. And look, it's come a situation where that's got to be what happens if they're going to be playing football into the second week of January. What's the recipe for success? What's the recipe to win 3 straight in your book?
I think it's the offense basically batting 1,000. The offense is going to have to be nearly flawless. Scoring on every possession is not realistic, but I think 28 plus is what it's going to take probably. And then from a defensive perspective, I think it's kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here because we just talked about maybe helping the secondary a little bit, maybe being a little bit more aggressive and just really trying to create splash plays, whether those are sacks, turnovers, interceptions, forced fumbles, and things like that. The argument against that is someone's going to say, well, you blitz more, you do that, you open yourself up to more explosive games where you're giving them up already. So you know what I mean? You maybe roll the dice and try like that, but then again, that puts more pressure on the offense to keep up. And if you're asking them to be perfect, now you're asking them to be perfect even more. So there's not really, there's no foolproof answer, but I think maybe that's an avenue that could be taken.
Yeah, for me, it's just the consistency in the run game. Yeah. I think because that also helps the defense out too. Yeah. It keeps that offense off the field. And Detroit has lost 1 game this year when they've rushed for 100 yards. I think it was 119 on Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. They've won every other game, and they've only rushed for the 100 yards once in a loss. So they're averaging 170.5 yards, I think it is, when they win games. In their losses, it's like 78.5.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's such a huge difference. And it's almost as simple as, look, the Lions rush the football well and consistently. They win football games. Mm-hmm. When they don't, They don't.
Sure.
And so, I'd like to see, we've seen this kind of Jahmyr Gibbs 3 touchdowns, none, 3, none, 2, none, rush the ball well. I just think it'll help everything out, all 3 phases. If they offensively can run the ball pretty consistently, control the game in that aspect, I think that is at least that's my recipe for how they win these last 3 games.
I was looking at the numbers earlier today to add to what you're saying. I think it's 5.8 a carry in their wins and like 3.5 in their losses. And, obviously there's some game flow stuff to that where, you run the ball more. You can't really run the ball when you're down a couple possessions in the second half. But success rate lines up with that. It's like a 20% difference in rushing success rate. EPA lines up with that. So, yeah, all the numbers definitely point to Lions run the ball well, the Lions win games.
We're still kind of early in the week here, at least when we're taping this, but what jumps out about the Steelers when you start to look at them?
I think it's a couple things. Again, with the explosive plays, they're not particularly explosive outside of DK Metcalf. He is, but he's really the only one on that team. Kenneth Gainwell is a guy that catches a lot of passes out of the backfield for them. And I think we talked about a lot of 13 personnel last week against the Rams. The Steelers do it as well. They've got 3 tight ends that they get on the field, and Dan Campbell spoke about that today, talking the Steelers are looking at that Rams game film, maybe licking their lips a little bit, saying we can out-physical these guys, and it's up to the defense to not let that happen again.
Yeah, to your point, second most, I think, in 13 personnel. So maybe the positive is you saw it last week,
Sure.
and so you know what it looks like, what you did wrong, and maybe you know how you have to scheme it personnel-wise, maybe a little bit different. For me, it's the red zone and takeaways. And I say that, Rich, because you look at this Steelers offense, they're 27th in total offense, but they're 13th in scoring. You don't see that kind of huge difference all that much, but it's because they're one of the top teams in the league in the red zone. I think it's a lot of what you talked about with the 13 personnel, the 3 tight ends that you can utilize in the red zone, Gainwell, the running back, as a weapon. But they're one of the best. They take advantage of their scoring opportunities.
Sure.
And I think that's where Detroit's got to be really good defensively, is limiting them, getting those 4 points off the board. I think that's going to be big in this game. And then the takeaways, it's almost the same thing. Defensively, they're 28th in total defense, but they're 18th in scoring defense. Why? Well, because they're 3rd in the league in takeaways with 24. You don't have as many opportunities against them. So winning the red zone and winning the turnover battle, obviously the turnover battle, we can say that every week, but the red zone, I think, is going to be particularly important this week on both sides of the football for Detroit to take advantage of their opportunities, but also, limit the Steelers in theirs. All right, let's go to this. Number one thing the Lions have to do Sunday to kick off what needs to be now a 3-game win streak to end the season.
Just say get after the quarterback a little bit. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying about creating turnovers, just creating disruption, I guess, so to speak. Creating a turnover with your pressure, an impactful pressure. I know some fans maybe are sick of hearing about pressure numbers and things like that, especially when the Lions are maybe a little bit slow to pressure, but impactful pressures that cause Rodgers to get rid of the ball quickly or knocking the ball out of his hands or things like that. That to me is what I've got circled.
Yeah, tough task against him.
Yeah, no doubt.
He's seen it all. He gets the ball out of his hands really, really quick. But obviously, I think Hutch has got to have a big game. Obviously, Muhammad's come on. I agree with you. And I'd like to see a little bit more from the interior pressure, too.
Absolutely.
I think Aleem needs to have himself a big game. He had a sack, I think, against Dallas, maybe. But he's
on
been
the backwards pass.
Yeah, he's been kind of quiet a little bit of a few weeks. They need a little bit more from him inside. Let's just get right to it. Our Lions playoff team. Do you see them winning these 3 games to end the year?
It's funny because we did our season predictions at the Detroit News, and I actually had them at 7-5 at the 12-game mark, which is what they were in real life, and then I had them going 4-1 down the stretch, and now they've lost 1 game or a couple games or whatever. There's 3 games left, so my season-long prediction, I had them ending hot. But it's funny, now that we're here, it's like, now it's reality. Now, you know what I mean? Now I know this team's words. Can they really get it done? I'm going to say yes right now, and I'm very much not, it's a coin toss, just like all the predictive sites that are out there say it is.
Yeah.
But it starts with winning your 3 games. There's a bunch of scenarios that get you in, the Bears could lose a game, the Packers could lose 2, especially because they're down Parsons now and Watson. The 49ers have 3 tough games in front of them, but it really starts with the Lions winning 3 in a row. And if you made me pick right now, I'm going to say yes, but again, 50-50.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of excited just to see this team with their backs against the wall. It's such a talented football team, and they've had so much success the last 2 years. a little different situation. Now you're fighting for your playoff life at this point. A little bit different. Last year you were fighting for a division, but you knew you were playing playoff football. It's a little bit different, and it'll be interesting to see how these guys react. But to your point, to get on a streak, you got to win the first one.
Right.
And so huge game, the biggest game in the season up to this point. He is Richard Silva, does a great job with the news. Where can they find you on X?
At Rich_Silva 18.
All right, does a great job. We'll be right back with Jared Goff. Welcome back to the Twentyman Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft. Everybody knows who's sitting next to me, the quarterback of the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff. Thanks for joining me. I love when you come on once a year, but it's a little bit different. Now, since you've been on last time, you are now a father. Congratulations.
Right. Thank you.
How is that going, and how has fatherhood maybe changed you a little bit?
Yeah,
Jared?
it's been awesome, dude. She's awesome. She's a little over 5 months now, and Kristen's doing a great job with her at home. She's growing. She's learning. She's doing new stuff every day, and it's been a lot of fun. It's taught me a lot about what really matters and puts a lot of things in perspective.
Obviously, the sleep schedule has probably changed a little bit, but how has it changed you as a football player, if at all?
Yeah, I think you're able to look at games and practice with a really macro, look. Of course, you want to do well. Of course, you want to win. Of course, you want success. But every day I come home, she doesn't know what happened, what went right, what went wrong. So it gives you that good perspective.
It's Christmas time, and obviously there's a tradition around here with you taking care of your teammates. Has that already been done? Are you still last minute? Are you breaking any news here?
I got the O-line gifts coming this week.
Okay.
I'll do something for the quarterbacks, and then I'll get a few things for some other people as well.
What goes into that decision? Is Kristen part of it? Are you polling people?
For the O-line?
Yeah, for the O-line especially, because you've come up with some good stuff. But yeah, I mean, after 10 years,
it's hard after 10 years trying to do something not only new, so a 10th gift that you haven't done before, but something that they'll like, something that they don't already have or can just get themselves. So yeah, you have to get kind of creative, and I'll actually ask some of those veteran guys, hey, like, how does this sound? How does this sound? And they'll give me a pretty good feedback there.
How much do you enjoy that? How fun is that day?
It's great.
Is it like the little kids seeing the smile on their faces and everything?
It's good. Yeah, I try to keep it a surprise. Try not to let them know what it is, and hopefully they're surprised.
All right, Jared. Obviously, the record isn't what you guys want it to be. Your playoffs start Sunday, but do you see that maybe as an opportunity?
Absolutely. Yeah, you always have to. I mean, of course, we're in a spot now where we're in some must-win games, and we know that, and but yeah, you hopefully you can fast forward 3 weeks from now, and we're won the last 3 and head into the playoffs with 11 wins under our belt and one of the hottest teams in the league, and that's what we hope we can get to. But certainly starts with the first week now in Pittsburgh and having a good practice today and moving on.
I'm curious, how does a wide receiver build trust with Jared Goff?
Just reps, man. Just reps. I don't think it's just me. I think it's everybody. Reps, timing, being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there over and over and over again, and then making contested catches, in traffic that allow me to not be afraid to throw the ball into traffic thinking something bad's going to happen. And I've got 2 really good ones right now who are great at that.
It seems like, just talking with Jamo specifically, he's really built that trust with you over the years. He's having a terrific season. In my opinion, his best season. Even if it doesn't end up statistically his best season, I think just with the way he's grown his route tree and been a bigger part of the entire field. How is that relationship between you two built for those people that aren't in the building? What has gone into that? What do you guys do special? And just how has that built over the years?
We work on a lot of stuff. We're constantly talking. We're constantly communicating. I think the main thing this year different is his communication to me. I think he understands it on such a different level now. And that's just time as you get older. And so he knows not only what I'm looking for, but like what he's looking for in order to get in and out of a route and where the ball should be. And so he's very vocal with me on what he's seeing from a corner, how he sees his cut coming out, how he sees, his angle coming back to me or away from me. So all that stuff, all those little minute details accelerates that trust and that process so much. He's done such a great job of that. And he's just scratching the surface. He really is. It's so exciting. And he's doing a great job. And I think in that Dallas game the week before that, was it Green Bay?
Yes.
When St. Brown went down.
Yes.
That was when you could see he knew he was going to get the lion's share of the targets, and you could see his kind of growth happen there tremendously.
And when he drops that weight, I mean, he's uncoverable on a comeback route, isn't he? With his speed and that part of it, I think he's really developed and really, really come along. That's been impressive.
Yeah, when he does things right, man, there's not many better. And with his speed, it becomes that much harder to drop your weight and come back to the ball with how fast he's moving forward. But when he does it right, man, it's special. It really is. And he's been doing it a lot more right than he has any other way.
I talk about doing things right. I mean, Jared, you're top 5 in yards and touchdowns, passer rating, interception rate. I mean, you go down the list, you're top 5 in all these things, yet you've dealt with 2 new starters along the offensive line. You've dealt with some injuries. How do you continue to play at this level despite what's going on around you?
It's a great supporting cast, not only the starters, but the guys who are filling in at this point in the season. Everyone's got guys banged up and whatnot, and our guys that have filled in and been there when it mattered have done a great job on the O-line and in the second, or in our receivers, tight ends, everywhere. They've done such a great job filling in, and a lot of times, at quarterback, you're just distributing, and those stats, those numbers are a product of kind of what everyone's doing, and I do my best to sit in there, be tough, and make those throws, and those guys do the rest.
St. Brown get enough credit for what he means for you and for this offense, and really just where his place is among the elite wide receivers in this league?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think he gets a lot of credit. I'm not sure if you can ever give a guy like him enough, though. I mean, he's such a stud. He does everything right. He's always where he's supposed to be. He's on time. He's fast. He's physical. He's strong. He gets in and out of his breaks. He does everything right. He blocks well. I mean, he's a guy that I'm so lucky to play with, and I think he does elevate everyone around him. As all of us want to do as players. It's one thing to just be a great player, but another thing to elevate guys, and he does that pretty consistently.
We already talked about J-Mo. 90 straight catches for St. Brown in 5 straight seasons. I think he's the first person to ever do it. I mean, just that level of consistency with him. Are those two considered among should they be considered among the top duos in the league right now?
As far as I can tell, yeah. I mean, shoot, Saints doing stuff no one's ever done in the NFL ever right now, and J-Mo in the last month or two has really come into his own, and he just continues to ascend. Though I say the last month or two, he was getting better throughout the beginning of the season too, but. Yeah, those guys. I mean, it's hard for me to find a duo that's better, and I'm lucky to play with them.
What have you liked about the way Jahmyr has been more involved in the passing game? Where have you seen him maybe take his biggest strides in that aspect of his game?
Some of the route running stuff's been really good. We all know he can do the stuff out of the backfield, and they both run great routes out of the backfield, but being able to split him out wide and let him run some receiver routes and seeing what that looks like, it's been really impressive. And we've kind of known he has that in his arsenal, in his bag, but seeing it kind of come to life in game recently has been great.
You guys are in heavy game plan mode, obviously, for the Steelers. What jumps out about them and their defense when you flip the tape on and start preparing for them?
Yeah, physical, really well coached. You can tell they know their system. Interesting the way they use Jalen, and I was around him. He's a ball guy. He's always around the ball. They're now got him at safety, doing a little bit of that. So there's some interesting things there with where they move some guys around, and it'll be a good one.
The takeaways is the big thing for me. I think they're 3rd in the league with 24. You've obviously been very good at that. 5 interceptions only all year. How big is that? Obviously, that's a big stat line every week. Yep. But in a week like this, when a team kind of makes their bread on takeaways, you look at some of the defensive numbers, and they're not in the top of the league in a lot of categories, but they play good defense because they take the ball over. How important will that aspect of the game be on Sunday?
Always is, but yeah, when they're a team that's kind of staying alive defensively based off that, yeah, absolutely. You got to take care of the ball, and they've done a good job being opportunistic in that way and making those plays when they get there, and I got to do a good job of keeping it out of harm's way and putting it in our guys' hands.
Well, it's must-win territory for you guys, looking to go on a stretch here to end the season, and then, like you talked about earlier, then be playing your best ball going to the playoffs. But you got to win 1 before you can win 3, so good luck on Sunday, and go get them.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Welcome back to the Twentyman Huddle podcast. Very happy to welcome in Brian Batko. Does a great job covering everything Pittsburgh Steelers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Tim. This will be my first time in Detroit ever in 34 years of life, despite living in Pittsburgh this entire time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Really? The 2 cities that I think are very familiar, they're similar, hard-nosed, kind of Midwesty, even though I know you guys are a little east, but two cities I think have a similar dynamic. Hard-working, hard-nosed, kind of that kind of city. You'll love Detroit. I love Pittsburgh personally.
Yeah, the furthest I've ever made it is Toledo. So I've actually never made it to Michigan, although I have an aunt and uncle who live in Maumee or Sylvania, so right there on the border. So now I'm finally going to cross over into Michigan.
Well, good. Make sure I don't know if you're staying downtown or not, but if you are staying close to Ford Field, you'll love it. It's a foodie place now with restaurants and lots of different things to do. So you'll love your time, certainly, here in Detroit. Well, Brian, we're talking early in the week, and so obviously there's some things that are going to play out injury-wise through the course of the week, but maybe just best guesstimates right now with what the Steelers are dealing with injury-wise, and obviously the big one is TJ Watt.
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to say TJ is going to be able to make it back for this game, Tim. I mean, there's some differing opinions out there on, hey, collapsed lung. It's not quite as bad as it sounds, and it's weird to say it's almost callous, but in some ways it's better than being out with a soft tissue injury that can linger or something like that. But anytime you have to have surgery, and as unexpected as it was for TJ with an incident that happened while getting treatment at the Steelers facility, I don't think anybody really has a great feel for it. I am on the side of, we haven't seen him back with the team yet as of Wednesday afternoon. So I'd be hard pressed to predict that he's going to be out there for this one.
Big win for the Steelers on Monday night against the Dolphins, 8-6, same record as Detroit. You guys are division leaders right now, but still, Detroit's obviously in must-win territory. They've got to win out to have a good shot in the NFC. Steelers are in it right now, but do they still view this game, Brian, Sunday as kind of a must-win just with their situation and the closeness of the division, or do they feel pretty comfortable? Just kind of where's their standing heading into this game?
I think it's tough to get into the psyche of the players, and of course they would never say anything other than that, right? But I do wonder if a lot of them understand the scenarios here that are at work where, as long as the Steelers beat the Ravens in Week 18, it actually doesn't matter what happens in this game or the next game against Cleveland for them. But of course, you'd love to have that wiggle room of not needing to beat the Ravens in Week 18 and maybe even resting your guys in Week 18, obviously, if you take care of business in Detroit and in Cleveland. So that's quite the Rust Belt back-to-back there for the Steelers. But I think they would love it for the momentum. You know, I don't think they've had I'm trying to think if they've had a 3-game win streak this year. I don't know that they have. They haven't even won 2 games in a row since early October until these Ravens and Dolphins victories back-to-back. So there's a lot of stuff out there with the playoff scenarios being what they are. I don't want to say that this is like a non-conference game in college football or college basketball, but it's a tough game for sure, and it would give them some breathing room if they can pull it off. But I guess my bottom line is, if they don't, it's not the end of the world, and they still control their own fate.
Gotcha. Speaking of Lions fans, know what you mean about not getting back-to-back wins for quite a while. It's been week 4 and week 5 for Detroit since getting back-to-back wins. So now they've got to go on a 3-0 stretch. So it's must win, and that's the mentality here. So obviously that's their thought going in. I'm just curious, when you look at Aaron Rodgers and kind of how it's fit and where he's got that team, Brian, when you've watched him and just how he's interacted with everybody around, why is that fit this year with him being in Pittsburgh? Because it seems like it's been a pretty good marriage there.
Yeah, I think it has. I think it's been an upgrade from the duo of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields last year. And it's certainly been an upgrade from the post-Ben Roethlisberger wilderness that they were in with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. And, you know, even Mason Rudolph was involved there a little bit and ironically had the most success of those 3 because he was the lone holdover from Ben Roethlisberger's time here. But I think Rodgers probably gets along a little bit better, or is maybe a little more philosophically aligned with Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator here. I think in some ways he was good for this team because, you know, they're a really young group of skill position players outside of this offseason acquisitions of DK Metcalf and Jonnu Smith. But otherwise, young players on their first contracts by and large. And I think Rodgers has kind of raised the standard, and you know, that sort of temperament from him can be much maligned when things are going poorly. But I think when you see it flow the way that it has recently, it shows you that it's actually been a positive development that Rodgers is so precise and he holds guys accountable. And he's been the voice that this offense has lacked really since those late years of Ben.
And speaking of the offense, Detroit's got one of the best running back duos in the league in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. But, the Steelers have kind of developed their own kind of version of a pretty good duo there with Jalen and with Gainwell. Gainwell leading them with 57 receptions, which is kind of amazing, for a running back to be leading a team in receptions if your name's not Christian McCaffrey. But just what do you like about that duo and how it's fit into their schemes offensively there in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, they're both just good, effective players that rarely get brought down by the first tackler. And, all offseason after they signed Kenneth Gainwell, and certainly once they drafted Caleb Johnson out of Iowa in the 3rd round, I figured that Warren and Gainwell were sort of overlapping pieces a little bit, and that Warren would be the lead back with Gainwell kind of sprinkled in there on the passing downs, a 3rd down receiving specialist. But he's become a lot more than that. To his credit, he's shown that he's not just that scat back that he was in Philly. And I think even the Steelers have probably been a little bit surprised by him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have used a 3rd round pick on another running back. So, they're somewhat similar players. I'd say Warren's a little more of the thunder to the lightning for Gainwell, but they're slippery, they're shifty, they'll pass protect, and they don't drop many passes. So they're difficult and dangerous to deal with in space.
One thing Detroit's obviously looking at when you look at Pittsburgh's defense is obviously TJ Watt is one of the best players in the league, and they can get after the quarterback. I think you guys got 3 different guys with over 6 sacks, but to me, it's the takeaways have been the big thing with this defense. Just what's been the recipe for success with that, specifically when you look at the fumbles 12 that leads the NFL. That's kind of been their calling card on defense, hasn't it been, Brian?
For years, yeah, they just have a knack for it. And I think, more so than any, and they have a culture of takeaways, but I've never talked to anyone from an NFL team that they don't want to force turnovers. So that's kind of global around the league, right? But it's one thing to preach that. It's another thing to have players like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, Cam Hayward, who are so good at, getting their hands up in passing lanes or punching out footballs. And, the other big thing I think with them too is, they have those pass rushers who can get it done, but, they're also a lot more opportunistic when the game flow and the game script is heading in their direction. When they're getting run on left and right, they can't necessarily get those takeaways because other teams are in advantageous positions to just keep the ball on the ground and play keep away. And their time of possession has been horrendous this year. So the other factor here with that too is, we talked about injuries at the start, didn't mention this year's 1st round pick, Derek Harmon out of Oregon, who's a Detroit native. I want to say he's from 7 Mile, if I have that right. So
yep.
They've been missing him the last 3 weeks with a knee injury. The stats of when he's in the lineup and not in the lineup against the run are staggering for a rookie. So it sounds like he's going to be back, and he does a good job anchoring that defense left side, offense right side of the line when he's in there. And if they can at least contain Gibbs and Montgomery, then you feel like those other guys can pin their ears back and take the ball away.
All right, 2 more quick ones for you, Brian. Just what's the key matchup that you're looking at Sunday that's going to decide the difference between a Steelers win and 3 in a row and a loss?
Ooh, yeah. I think it probably for me is Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot versus Brandon Echols, the slot cornerback for the Steelers. They came into this season expecting Jalen Ramsey to be that guy, and so much has gone wrong for them in the secondary with poor play and injuries that Ramsey's a full-time safety now. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here when it comes to injuries in the secondary with the Lions. So that's not lost on me, but the Steelers have really had to shuffle things at corner, at safety. When I look back at the Chargers game, Ladd McConkey had a really big night against Echols. Echols has played a lot better since then, but he was sort of a cast off from the Jets. I think he's just kind of a guy to this point in his NFL career. But knowing the way that the Lions scheme things up for St. Brown and how much damage he can do, I feel like that's a key matchup to watch there in the nickel inside slot, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, there are certainly no tears shed from Lions fans when you talk about injuries to Pittsburgh in the secondary with what Detroit's been through, obviously. And last one, Brian, obviously an interconference matchup, don't see Pittsburgh that often. Who's a player maybe Lions fans don't know who could impact that game or kind of be a difference maker for Pittsburgh Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, he's had some plays go viral this season, but he doesn't show up statistically all that often, and that is tight end Darnell Washington, who's 6'7". He's listed still at 260 or 265, but it's kind of been a running bit around the league. It was actually on the St. Brown's podcast that he finally he spilled the tea that he would not give us beat writers for years now of what he actually weighs, and when he went on with them, he said 311, which I got a kick out of because he tried to duck it. And I think Amon-Ra or his brother was like, come on, we know you get on the scale every day. And we know that too, but we can't push an NFL player the same way his fellow members of the fraternity can. So Darnell Washington at 6'7", 311 is a true unicorn in the NFL playing tight end for the Steelers. And more so than what he's going to do in the passing game, I think lining him up on that left edge to try to combat Marcus Davenport, who's, probably one of the biggest edge rushers in the NFL.
Yeah, Washington is definitely a unique player in this league, Brian. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It should be a fun matchup. Obviously, it means a lot for Detroit, not as much for Pittsburgh, other than to keep things rolling and play good football going into the playoffs. It should be a fun, hard-nosed, physical battle, and I hope you enjoy your first time in Detroit and have some fun Saturday night.
Thanks. And yeah, my kindergartner has taken up the Lions as one of his favorite teams with the Steelers for whatever reason. I guess, 6-year-olds and Lions, and plus they're on primetime a lot. So when I get home from the game, they tend to be on TV if he's watching with me. So yeah, this is kind of his Super Bowl this weekend.
Well, what's his name?
Dawson.
Well, Dawson will definitely have a good time watching the game Sunday night, however it goes. And safe travels to Detroit. Enjoy your time here, and I'll make sure I come over and say hello. Thanks for joining me.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.